Hi, sweeties. How are you doing? Welcome to Naya. Sing us Naya, and thank you all so much for all the love and support. Hope you all are doing great. It's really amazing how palm-colored people all like they really want to be oppressed so bad, and you all already know how we've been trying so hard to tell them to keep quiet that they are not experiencing anything, especially when it comes to racism. But they still want to tell you that white people also experience racism today. And I am asking them, what exactly are you experiencing? Can you share with me what you have experienced that made you think that that you have experienced racism? Trust me, they are really so scared. They are so scared, and they all look like they also want to be oppressed so bad. That's why you see them all the time running helter saying that they are being oppressed and all that. That we're treating them like minority. We're making them feel like they are minority. So they actually know that there is how they treat minority, and who are the minorities. I mean, these people are really unbelievable. And let me say this: you all do not experience anything, and you have not felt it. You do not experience anything. You don't experience anything. You've never gone to the wrong house to knock, and probably you are on your way. You are like couldn't find where you are going to, and it's a pump color. You can easily walk into somebody and beep the bell and all that. If someone that look like me cannot do it, you go to the store, you are being followed, and you buy some things that is they call the cops on you, saying that I don't know how they made the money. They see you in a good neighborhood and they are doubting, how did you get into this place? They call the cops on you. I mean, you cannot do anything white, black. You know what? Let's get into this.
So, I'm going to go ahead and openly admit that I am completely ignorant about the white experience with racism, and I'm sure that is painfully obvious to a lot of you.
Hi, I'm Dr. C. I'm a professor of media studies, and my research focuses on race and pop culture. You have my attention.
Now, I know that I'm always telling other people don't be lazy and entitled, the internet is free, look things up on your own, but it's not that I haven't tried to engage in my own research. I have literally searched, how do white people experience racism? And unfortunately, not a lot of information comes up. Most of it is articles questioning whether white people can experience racism, or articles about the myth of anti-white racism. However, I of all people know that the dominant narrative is not necessarily accurate because it is often pushing a harmful agenda. So because there is that dearth of information on the internet, I was wondering if you could please help me understand, how do white people experience racism, and what does experiencing racism look like from your perspective as a white person?
So I'm not the person that this creator is responding to, and I realize that she is engaging in a rhetorical point. That being said, I think this is a good opportunity to talk about the ways in which that white folks are impacted adversely by racism. So the first thing to address is that the term racism has a lot of social cultural baggage associated with it. And honestly, it also has a couple different definitions that have been ascribed to it that make it kind of difficult to have a productive conversation around it. So let's get into what those two definitions are. So one definition associated with racism, which is a much more recent definition, is the idea of an interpersonal phenomenon wherein one person judges another person based on their perceived race and then attributes corresponding positive or negative traits. It's worth noting that this is a very colloquial use of the term, and it's a kind of definition you can find in a dictionary. And also, it's important to keep in mind that a dictionary is a reflection of how words are used, not a prescriber of how words should be used. The other definition, which is the original one, is that racism is the phenomenon of the reproduction of racial disparities and inequalities within a society through its structures and systems. And this concept has been maintained pretty consistently throughout academia, even as the concepts of race and racialization have been debated and evolved over time. It's kind of like the term intersectional. There is an academic understanding and a public use of the term, and the public use is significantly different. Anyway, if we want to talk about racism as an interpersonal phenomenon, then sure, anyone can experience it. That is race-based prejudice, and that is just another form of bigotry. But if we want to talk about this from a system and structural approach, which I would argue is more important, then we should look at the ways in which white people are negatively affected by pro-white racism. And that's going to involve looking at the negative consequences that people who complain about anti-whiteness don't typically discuss. Take, for example, lynchings. If you look at a photo of a lynching, let's say it's from the 1950s, you will, of course, see the desecrated remains of a person who has done a grave and violent injustice, more often than not, a person of color. And, of course, around them, you'll see white folks and often white children. Lynching exists at the intersection of personal prejudice and systemic racism. And obviously the most important thing about a lynching is the person whose life was taken. But secondary to that, and also a significant problem, is the fact that the people who took part in it were either desensitized or have become desensitized in the process, And what do you think it does to those kids? Those kids are being required to deny their own humanity so that they can deny the humanity of another person. And that is a trauma that has long-term psychological consequences, not just for those kids, but for everyone else in that community. And there are a couple other examples that really bring this into focus as well. One is community pools, and the other is home ownership. Once the process of integration began in the United States, it became common for communities that had public swimming pools to shut them down because they would rather deny that opportunity to everyone than allow black folks the chance to swim. In the case of home ownership, historically speaking, homes owned by black Americans have been undervalued by appraisers. This further drives down the value of other properties in those neighborhoods. And when you combine this with the phenomenon of white flight, where white Americans who had the means would relocate to other communities once black folks moved in, then what you have is a neighborhood where everyone's property values, white and black, are significantly decreased. And of course, this has implications for a lot of things, such as building generational wealth, because home ownership is a big part of that. And if your home isn't worth much, then your ability to generate wealth is greatly decreased. A lot of this boils down to the idea that rich and powerful white Americans as a class have been willing to sacrifice poor and middle-class white Americans as the collateral damage, as the acceptable losses in their efforts to oppress people of color.
And also, can you help me understand, if white people experience racism, why are there not more of you who are working to dismantle racism?
You know what? That is an excellent question.
Because what I've noticed is I'm often told that white people do experience racism without any specifics, and in the context of either gaslighting or upholding the racism that other people experience. Whereas with most people of the global majority, when we share similarities and differences in how we experience racism, we use that information to increase our work to dismantle racism. Whereas people like you seem to only bring it up to decrease that work.
No notes.
So I'm going to go ahead and openly admit that I am completely ignorant about the white experience with racism. But it's not that I haven't tried to engage in my own research. I have literally searched, how do white people experience racism? And unfortunately, not a lot of information comes up. I was wondering if you could please help me understand, how do white people experience racism, and what does experiencing racism look like from your perspective as a white person?
So you're essentially presupposing that everybody that can experience racism is going to experience racism universally in one way, depending on their racial group. But I don't think this is the best way to look at it. See, not even all black people experience racism in the same way. Not all Latinos, not all Asians, not all Pacific Islanders. So to attempt to Google this subjective experience when it comes to white people, and then to blame your lack of reason on the lack of Google search evidence, it just seems a bit naive. It feels like if you were to say, a man told me today that men can actually be sexually assaulted as well within this patriarchal society. And not just by other men, but by other women. He even told me that he had experienced this himself. I looked him dead in his face and I said, I don't know. Let me look this up on Bing. I will say, this lady does seem like she's coming from a genuine place of confusion and curiosity. So in all seriousness, if you genuinely want something to ponder on, this is what I would ask you. In terms of someone being mixed with black and white, do you believe that biracial individuals can experience racism? If so, do you believe that them being criticized for presenting and acting too black or presenting and acting too white would be an example of this racism? If a white person told this individual that they're acting too black and that they're not white enough, this would be them being antagonistic by using their preconceived notions of what a black person is and what a white person should be. In the same way, I believe a black person telling this individual that they're too white or that they're not black enough is them being antagonistic using their preconceived notions of what a white person universally is and what a black person universally should be. If we can acknowledge that this biracial individual is experiencing racism on both sides of the spectrum, aka anti-blackness as well as anti-whiteness, then why can't we apply that same capacity for experience to black and white individuals outside of being biracial?
Okay, y'all, so this comment. White people experience a weird racism where they're treated as if they're the ones who supported slavery and not our ancestors from 3+ generations ago, which creates an automatic disrespect. Really? Okay, so let me respond to this, because this was not a comment that was left on my feed, but I just want to respond to it because let me just say, white people, you don't experience racism. You might experience discrimination. You might experience prejudice, but you don't experience racism. But even if you did, you should. And let me explain to you why, because you seem to keep alluding to the fact that you don't know why black people feel a certain way about your ass. You do support slavery. You have supported it because, let me remind you, every time you go vote, you do not vote to dismantle the systems that were put in place during slavery time and still are in place today, that you, as whitey people, benefit from. Okay, so let me kind of break that down because I know some people are kind of slow. The word dismantle means to take down, to break apart, to get rid of. You don't vote against that. If you do not vote against it, then you are for it. You don't vote against it because you know that in some way it benefits you. You may not be able to see the way that it benefits you because you may be struggling. You have to work hard for everything you have. But you know that your life is not near as bad as a black person's life. You know that you're not treated near as bad as a black person. And you know that that is because of the systems that are in place today, that have been in place since the inception of slavery. And what you don't get is that black people are well aware of that. You cannot absolve yourself from it. You do not vote for black people to get reparations that this country duly owes. This country has never made retribution to black people or their descendants. Never made retribution to the slaves for all of the free labor, for everything. You, as a white person, uphold that. You have never fought against it. You say, well, how do you know I never fought against it? You don't know. You don't know that I'd never vote against it. Because if you had, you and many others like you, it would have been dismantled. It would not be in place any longer. And the treatment towards black people would not be as it is. So there you have it.
Honestly, the stupidity of this person, honestly, brainwashed, utterly brainwashed. Racism can work either way, whether it's white to black or black to white. These days, you are seeing a lot of racism black to white. For example, recently, I did a video recently of that, about a theatre in London that banned white people from going because it was a black person's show. Now that's racism because it's segregation based on skin colour. It's discrimination based on skin colour. If that happened the other way around, that would be called racism. So why is it when it happens to a white person, you don't call it racism? Is it maybe because you're a hypocrite? What about all the victims of grooming gangs? The girls were white, they were targeted because they were white. You telling me that's not racism as well? And also, what about the murder of Chris Donald in Glasgow in 2004? Yeah, I'm going to talk about it. He was a 15-year-old boy. He was coming home from school. He'd done nothing wrong, nothing. And he was kidnapped by several Pakistani men. And he was brutally killed, set on fire, sexually assaulted, and murdered. Because he was white. Because those people that came from Pakistan wanted to kill a white person. Is that okay to you? Is that not racism to you? Imagine if that was the other way around. Imagine if a white person had targeted a Pakistani boy. Again, there'd be uproar. You would be in uproar. But because it happens to a white child, it doesn't matter. You're a hypocrite and you're talking absolute shite.
So this is all I got from this, and you are the hypocrite because it's been happening. I'm not saying whatever that happened to anybody is right, but what I'm trying to say is that we've been screaming about the right to decision you all have been giving us all these years, and you all are not talking or saying anything about it. And the truth is that, like they said, if they are experiencing this right to decision, trust me, there would never be anything like right to decision anymore, because it would have been dismantled way years back, right? So I am going to ask again, how did you guys experience it? Because I am yet to understand. You guys go to the store, you have all the brands that you want at your back at corner. There is nothing you all are looking for. You go to the store, you don't get followed. I mean, even as a black person going to the store, man, like the good part is that you can even tell them, because they are always following you around and asking for a receipt when you are leaving, especially when you see your trolley looking really very full, and they are always like, how is this person going to afford this? I mean, did they ever experience all this? Do they experience police brutality? And of course they do not experience all of that. And all the time they want to tell us about right decision. Have they ever gone to the wrong house to knock and they get Pe0ple straight up? Of course, how were they? Did they ever have a town whereby it is sundown town where you cannot pass as a white? Of course, they do not have that. Have they experienced it? Of course, they have not. But each time we try to tell them what we're going through and all that, they want to tell you how there is. Right? They want to tell you how they are also experiencing what you are experiencing. What have you experienced? You probably might experience prejudice, discriminate, but you do not experience right to decision. It's really sad how they always want to be in every business, like anything that is going on, because they want you all to feel like we are all in the same, on the same level and all that. What you people are going through, you all guys are not going through anything. You all are not going through anything. So try and disrupt that system, because that system has been oppressing people that look like me from the onset, discrimination, all this, burning down towns and the rest of it. Each time they build again, they burn them down. And you think it's normal. See you all in my next video. Bye for now.